The restaurant was one of those upscale places where Margaret liked to hold court, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the marina, white tablecloths so crisp they could cut paper, and a wine list that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. The hostess had looked at us with that practiced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes when we arrived, probably taking in Emma's thrift store jacket and my off-season dress. She'd chosen the place specifically, I knew. Margaret always did when she wanted to make a point about success versus what she called settling for less. I'd arrived early with my daughter Emma, who was 13 and already developing that painful teenage awareness of social hierarchies. She'd asked me 3 times if her jacket was okay during the drive over. Once while we were parking, then again in the elevator. It was from a thrift store, clean and perfectly fine, navy blue with silver buttons that she'd loved when we found it. But next to her cousin's designer everything, I could see her starting to shrink into herself, shoulders curving inward the way kids do when they're trying to take up less space in the world. Margaret swept in 20 minutes late with her husband David and their 2 kids, Trevor and Madison. Both were in their early 20s, both driving cars that cost more than I'd made in the last 2 years combined. They made sure everyone knew it within the first 5 minutes of sitting down, the way people do when material possessions are their primary source of identity. "Sorry we're late," Margaret said, not sounding sorry at all. Her Chanel bag hit the table with an intentional thud. Madison was deciding between the BMW and the Mercedes. First world problems, right? Though I suppose not everyone deals with those kinds of decisions. Madison laughed, tossing her professionally highlighted hair, the kind of highlights that cost $300 at a salon. I went with the Beamer. The Mercedes felt too showy. I like to keep things understated. I watched Emma's hand go to her jacket hem, rubbing the fabric between her fingers. That small gesture nearly broke me, but I kept my face neutral. I'd learned that skill over many years of family gatherings. "Emma, sweetie, you're growing so fast," Margaret said, leaning over to air kiss near my daughter's cheek. "That jacket still fits you? I remember you wearing it last year." "It still fits," Emma said quietly. "Well, that's good. Practical." Margaret's smile had that sharp edge I knew too well. Not everyone can afford to keep up with fashion. Some people have to be more careful with money. The waiter appeared, saving me from having to respond. We ordered, Margaret naturally choosing the most expensive items and making a show of ordering wine that cost $140 a bottle. I ordered modestly. Emma asked for water and the cheapest pasta dish. "Just water." Trevor smirked. "Not even a soda?" "Water's fine," Emma said. "Trevor, don't tease your cousin," Margaret said, but her tone suggested she found it amusing. "Not everyone has the same opportunities you do." The food arrived, and for a few minutes there was blessed silence, broken only by the clink of silverware on expensive china. Then David started talking about the business expansion he and Margaret were planning, a second location for their boutique consulting firm. He talked about market penetration, growth trajectories, and capturing the millennial demographic. He spoke in that corporate language that sounds impressive but says very little, throwing buzzwords around like confetti at a parade. "We're looking at a significant expansion," David said, cutting into his $40 steak. "A $600,000 investment. Really going to put us on the map. Regional recognition, maybe even national if things go the way we're projecting." "That's ambitious," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "We've got the clients, we've got the reputation, we've got 5-year projections showing consistent growth. We just need the capital." Margaret waved her hand dismissively, her diamond tennis bracelet catching the light. "The bank's processing our loan application now. It should be approved any day. They'd be idiots not to jump on this opportunity. Our business model is solid gold." Trevor leaned back in his chair. "Dad's letting me manage the new location. I'll be making 6 figures before I'm 25. "That's wonderful," I said. "What do you do again?" Madison asked as if she didn't already know. We'd been through this at every family gathering for the past 3 years. "I work at First National Bank," I said. "Like a teller?" she said, the way someone might say like a janitor. "Something like that." Margaret jumped in and I knew what was coming. I'd heard variations of this speech my entire adult life. "You know, Sarah, I've been meaning to talk to you about this. I don't want to overstep, but as your older sister, I feel responsible for giving you some guidance." I said nothing. Emma's hand was back on her jacket. "The thing is, and I say this with love, you need to think about what example you're setting for Emma. Kids model their parents' behavior. If they see settling, they learn to settle. If they see ambition and success, they learn that instead. I see, I said. Look at Trevor and Madison. They've grown up watching David and me build something real. They understand what it takes to succeed. They're not afraid to reach for more. She took a sip of her expensive wine. But some kids, through no fault of their own, just absorb different lessons. They see limitations instead of possibilities. David nodded along. It's about mindset. Success breeds success. Poverty, unfortunately, often breeds more poverty. It's just statistics. Emma's face had gone red, not from anger but from shame. That look on my daughter's face, that moment when a child realizes their parent can't protect them from cruelty, burned through my chest. Some kids just stay poor like their parents, Margaret said, looking directly at Emma. It's not anyone's fault. It's just how things work. Breaking that cycle takes extraordinary effort that, frankly, most people just don't have. Trevor laughed. Harsh, Mom, but true. Madison was scrolling through her phone. Oh my God, Brittany just posted pictures of her new apartment. It's gorgeous. Must be nice to have parents who set you up for success. I felt my phone buzz in my pocket. I'd been expecting it. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. I pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and allowed myself a small smile. Something funny? Margaret asked. Just an email, I said. Work-related. On Sunday. See, Emma, this is what I mean. Your mom's working on her day off, probably not even getting overtime. That's the treadmill of lower-level positions. Always working, never getting ahead. I set my phone down on the table, screen up but not obvious. Actually, Margaret, speaking of work, you mentioned your loan application? Yes, it should be approved this week. Why? Which bank did you apply through? David answered. First National. They've got the best commercial rates in the area. We went through them for our first location too, but this is a much bigger loan. $600,000 is substantial. First National, I repeated. That is convenient. Why? Margaret's eyes narrowed slightly. Because I work there. As you mentioned. I picked up my water glass and took a slow sip. I actually saw your application cross my desk this week. My desk? Trevor laughed. You're a teller. Tellers don't see loan applications. I used to be a teller, I said calmly. For about 6 months when I first started. Then I moved to customer service. Then loan processing. Then assistant manager. The table went quiet. Last Monday, I was promoted to regional commercial loan manager. I oversee all business loan applications over $500,000 in this district. I looked at Margaret. Including yours. David's face lost color. You're joking. I'm not. Would you like me to pull it up? I have the mobile app. I reached for my phone. The application is under D. Winters Consulting Group, filed 3 weeks ago, requesting $600,000 for commercial expansion. It's currently in preliminary review. Margaret's mouth opened and closed. You never said anything about a promotion. You never asked about my actual job. You assumed. That's different. I scrolled through my phone not because I needed to but because I enjoyed the theater of it. You know what's interesting about loan applications? They require character references, employment history, and financial responsibility assessments. We have excellent credit, David said quickly. You do. That's not in question. I set my phone down again. But there's something else we look at: social media presence and public behavior. When you're trusting someone with $600,000, you want to know who they are as people. How they treat others. Their values. Trevor had stopped smirking. I've been documenting these family gatherings for years, I continued, my voice perfectly even. Not secretly, just notes. Dates, quotes, witnesses. Emma's therapist suggested it might be helpful for her to process the bullying. Today's lunch, for instance. Multiple witnesses heard you tell a 13-year-old child that she'd stay poor like her parents. That's quite something to say in public. That's not what I meant, Margaret started. It's exactly what you said. I can ask the waiter to confirm if you'd like. I glanced around the restaurant. There are probably a dozen people here who heard you. Some are looking at us right now, actually. They didn't seem to like it much. The silence stretched. Emma was staring at me with wide eyes. Now about your loan, I said. The preliminary review showed some concerns. Not with your financials, they're solid. But with risk assessment, we have to consider what happens if a business relationship sours. If there's a lawsuit. If there are public relations problems. There won't be any problems, David said tightly. That's good to hear. But we also look at judgment and decision-making. For instance, someone who publicly humiliates family members, including a child, at a restaurant shows a lack of discretion and poor impulse control. Those are red flags in a business partner. Margaret's hands were shaking slightly. You can't deny our loan because of a personal disagreement. I can deny it for risk assessment reasons, which I have. Your application was flagged for additional review this morning. That adds 6 to 8 weeks to the process. Maybe longer if new concerns arise. I took another sip of water. Of course you could appeal. That would require going to my supervisor, who happens to agree with my assessment. We discussed your application at length on Friday. This is unprofessional, Trevor said. What's unprofessional is not knowing who you're talking to before you insult them. I turned to him. Your mother's loan is in jeopardy because she couldn't keep her cruelty to herself for one meal. That's not my problem. That's hers. Madison had gone pale. Mom, the lease on the new location, we already signed it. Based on loan approval you assumed was coming, I said. That's another decision-making red flag. Spending money you don't have yet. The loan committee is going to want to discuss that. David stood up abruptly. This is ridiculous. We're leaving. Of course. Lunch is on me today. I pulled out my wallet. I make enough now to cover it. A regional manager's salary is quite comfortable. They left in a rush, Trevor and Madison trailing behind their parents. I watched them go, then looked at Emma. Her eyes were still wide, but now there was something else there. Something like hope. Mom, she whispered. Is that all true? Every word. You're really a regional manager? I am. I've been for a week. I was waiting for the right time to mention it. That was so cool, she breathed. I signaled for the check. You know what's actually cool? Your jacket. I love that jacket. It looks great on you, and the fact that we found it for $12 makes it even better. That's smart shopping. Aunt Margaret said. Aunt Margaret says a lot of things, most of them designed to make herself feel bigger by making others feel smaller. That's not strength. That's weakness. The waiter brought the check and I paid, leaving a generous tip. As we walked out, Emma slipped her hand into mine. Will they really not get the loan? She asked. Probably not. The risk assessment is legitimate. They're overextended, planning expansion based on projected income they haven't secured. That's actually a valid reason to deny the loan. I squeezed her hand. But I would have found that whether Margaret was nice or cruel, she just made it easier to see. We drove home in comfortable silence. That evening my phone rang, Margaret's name on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. Then David called. Then Margaret again. I ignored them all. The next morning I received an email from David. It was formal and stiff, apologizing for any misunderstanding and requesting reconsideration of their application. I forwarded it to my supervisor with my original assessment notes attached. Her response came back in 10 minutes. Denied. Too many red flags. Good call. I didn't tell Emma about the email. She didn't need to know all the details. What she needed to know was that standing up for yourself matters. That quiet dignity beats loud cruelty. That her mother's job, whatever it was, had value. That Sunday we went shopping at the thrift store together. Emma picked out 3 new jackets, all for under $20 total. She wore them proudly. Margaret and David's expansion plans fell through. Without the loan, they couldn't make the lease payments on the new location. The last I heard, they were struggling to keep even the original location profitable. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Sometimes the best revenge is simply being underestimated, and then proving exactly who you are when it matters most.